So before we were chatting, you said that was it almost like stumbling into the email marketing world for you?
Yeah, pretty much. So I said I was in the Philippines at the time. I'd kind of had this internship, a bit of a weird deal, but basically I was on a beach in the Philippines at a beach resort, and I was doing their website marketing, their internet marketing, say 1 or 2 days a week. And in exchange, they were giving me 3 meals a day and a room to sleep in. And the idea was that while I was there, I was building up my own something on the side, and I kind of went through several different ideas, and nothing really was working. I was making like $100 a month at one point, a couple $100 a month with a website or two that I had. So just nothing was working, and eventually I decided I was gonna learn copywriting, and so I did that. I did what guys like Gary Halbert and those guys recommend, and as once I kind of developed, the chops and actually had some sort of skills, one of the people that I knew, a guy who became a friend and who had a business, I guess was a bit of a mentor. He saw what I was doing and just offered me, basically a couple $100 to write him an autoresponder. We did that, and his opt-in rate jumped by 257%. And then after that, he kind of casually says one day that, well, how about we do a podcast about it? And I kind of had to hassle him. I kept coming back to him to get this podcast happening. We did the podcast all about how we did this opt-in rate increase and what the responder was, what the offer was, what we changed about his website. And ever since after that, people just came to me for autoresponders. I'd get the occasional sales letter client where I'd write one of those ugly long-form sales letters, but the vast majority of people were coming to me for email autoresponders. So that was, when was that? That was October last year in 2012. And then in February or March this year, 2013, I realized that I needed to position myself properly. I couldn't just be a copywriter. I had to be someone that would stand for something. So then it dawned on me that, well, I'm going to call myself the autoresponder guy and be the guy who people go to just for autoresponders. I can do other stuff if people want that, but I'm going to focus in on email autoresponders. And that move has, been great from a marketing perspective. It's allowed me to focus my kind of area of, learning and study just on email. And yeah, so now I do email. My entire site, my entire brand, everything I do is all built around email.
So why do you think the importance of email marketing versus like sales letter marketing? Because those two are totally different. I've got my own opinions because I
Mm.
consider myself an email copywriter, not a long form sales copywriter.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about that. Like, how did you decide that this is the path you want to go down, and how is that different than your typical sales letter stuff?
That's a great question. Emails are very different to sales letters, and just personally, I hate writing sales letters. They're fun and I can do it, and it's good, but I hate doing it. It's emotionally draining to sit down and bring all the research in and write some sort of good copy. Whereas emails are so relaxed and so you just sit down. It's a conversation. It's like you're just having a cup of coffee with someone or a drink at the bar, and you tell a story about something, and then you offer them something. You make a pitch for something, and the reason why it's important is that you have a sales letter, and to cold traffic, most cold traffic, they're not going to buy straight away. They're just not. They're not ready for whatever reason. Maybe they got a bad day. Maybe their wallet's not on them, so they don't have their credit card. Maybe their problem's not urgent enough yet. But in a week's time or a month's time, they're going to be ready to buy. The problem is, though, if you only have a sales letter, when they're ready to buy, they're not going to go to you unless they remember you. They're going to go to whoever pops into their head at that time. So what email marketing allows businesses to do is to stay front of mind with these potential customers, so that when they're ready, when they're finally ready to buy something, you're the person they go to.
So you mentioned a keyword in there. You said you're talking about going through and engaging, having a story with them, having a
Yep.
conversation, and then you can lead into it. I've done my homework, and you actually follow a process. So
Yep.
do you want to share our audience what that is, like what those steps are and the acronym and how that works?
The HIPS framework.
Yep. So do you want to share that with them? 'Cause
Absolutely,
that's
man.
pretty valuable.
Okay. So the basic idea is, there's all sorts of ways that people do email marketing. I've kind of been doing this HIPS framework way for a good 6 months now. And the first time I did it, I sent daily emails Monday to Friday to my list, and I pitch. I offer them my product. I tell them to buy it, and I tell them why they should buy it every single day. And before I started this, or just when I was changing to this method, I had no idea if it would work. Whether I just piss everyone off and I'd get kicked out of my autoresponder software, people from all the complaints. But it's actually been, I swear, it's one of the best things I've done on the email marketing side of things. And so the framework that I use is, I'm calling it the HIPS framework. And so H stands for hook. So you got to hook their attention. I stands for interest. That's where you got to get them interested. They're not going to read your email if they're not interested in it. Then you tell them a story or a parable, just like, say, Jesus did, or just like Buddha did, just like the old religious teachers would tell parables, and then they have a moral. So, it'll be a parable about, or a story, because it's essentially a story, or Aesop's fables is another example. They tell a story, and then there's a moral. And this is just an old method of teaching stuff that really gets into people's heads. So you've got hook, interest, parable, and then the sell, or slide is what I called it with that framework. So you go from the parable, and you tell basically a parable or a fable or a story, whatever you want to call it, and then you slide into the pitch. And that's basically where the moral of the story is that they should buy your product, or that they should go and click the link that you're giving them, or that they should listen to the podcast. Whatever the call to action is, the moral of the story that you tell them is that they should go and do what you're asking them to do.
I like that. So in the regular copywriting world, which I agree with you, I really don't like writing long sales letters. To me,
yep.
I like to put on some headphones or be in the right mood and write and engage, like picture who I'm writing to. Whereas a long form sales letter, you can't write it all at one time. Yeah. And so you ebb and flow out of how you're feeling. But in the long form sales letter, it's the AIDA. And so HIPS actually works really well with these copywriters. Now, daily, how in the world do you get away with sending messages to people daily?
I think, I mean, to start with, I have a really high unsubscribe rate. So last I checked, 1 in 3 people was unsubscribing from my list, which is very high. Now, some people think that's a bad thing. I don't get many complaints, which is interesting, but I do get a lot of unsubscribes. And occasionally I get people, when they unsubscribe, they can leave a message, and they'll be sometimes they rant and rave about how they don't like my emails, or I'm sending way too many. Because sometimes I send 3 or 4 emails in a day if I have something to share. But the baseline is daily, Monday to Friday. And to start with, every opt-in on my site says sign up for daily email tips. So I don't hide the fact that I'm going to send them daily emails. I'm very honest about it. And then what I'm also honest about is that I tell them I'm going to sell them something in every single email. I say this I'm pretty sure I say this on the main squeeze page. I tell them this on the thank you page, and I tell them this in the first email, that I'm not in the free information business. I'm not here to just give them a whole bunch of tips and then they can just go on their merry way. I'm here to sell them stuff. I'm here to make them give me money to solve their problems. And by being, especially in my industry, because I'm in the marketing industry, people are so used to people trying to manipulate them and mess with them and make them do stuff that they don't really want to do. I just come out and say, look, I want you to do this, and it's going to be in your best interest to do it. And I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm trying to make you do it. And if you don't like it, you can just unsubscribe. So what happens is the people who don't like me, or don't like my style, or don't like... So there's a bunch of instruction going on there. The people who don't like my style just get off the list. And the people who stay on there, so while I have a really high unsubscribe rate, the people who are on that list are so incredibly responsive. They reply to my emails, they fill out my surveys, they buy my products. It's just incredible. So one thing I've learned is that like open rates, click-throughs, unsubscribes, spam complaints, all of that stuff doesn't matter if the goal of the email autoresponder sequence is to make sales. Because I have a very aggressive strategy, and it basically pre-qualifies people, or it just gets rid of the people who wouldn't buy my product anyway. And it took me a while to learn this, but there's no point in trying to help those people. You don't want what marketers and what business people need to learn with their marketing is that they should only be trying to help. Their marketing should be created specifically only for their target prospect. That means they're going to be turning down a whole bunch of people because they're not going to appeal to everyone. But they're going to appeal to a very, very small slice of that market. But that's going to be what gets them the most sales. But their open rate might not be that high, and everything else might be a bit low.
Now, with that perspective that you have, and I've read some of your copy, you use a very conversational tone.
Yep.
So I would assume that you're excluding a lot of the baby boomers from your tone. You're probably excluding a lot of females. You're excluding a lot of people that are just kind of whiners.
Yep.
and people that are easily offended.
Mm.
Now, when you're writing your copy, do you think about one specific person, or are you thinking about a group of people? How do you write that? Like, how do you get into that, that actual writing process?
I think with emails, I find it really easy. I mean, this is why I don't like sales letters, is because I have to put so much effort into researching and understanding that prospect. Whereas with an email, to be honest, man, I don't actually, when I sit down to write an email, I just think about something that would be kind of interesting to someone who is on my list. And then I write it. I don't put much effort. Maybe it's more natural and it comes very easily now, but I don't I don't have to get myself into the right mood or the right state of mind where I'm thinking about the prospect sitting across the table from me. But I've been doing this with this market for the last over 18 months now. So it's given me a good understanding where I don't have to think about that so much. But the main things is like I guess I'm aware. So what that 18 months has done for me is that now I know what the hot buttons are in that market, what challenges people have, what beliefs that they have about email marketing that are wrong, such as things like why open rates don't matter. That's one of the emails that I send out. And then I've been in that position. 18 months ago, I was just learning how to write email copy so I could do it for clients. So I've been there, done that. So I'll write about stuff that I could have used 6 months ago or 12 months ago. That's where the emails come from.
Okay. Let's go into when you're writing emails for other people.
Yep.
How do you figure out, let's say you're writing, have you ever written for startup type of businesses, or obviously you've written for clients, so how do you start to find their voice and how do you map out that sequence?
I think about autoresponders, or just marketing in general, is that you got basically I came up with this idea of the bridge. So you've got the prospect, which is over here, and the prospect is the person, they're say like a middle-aged man and they're a little bit overweight. And blah, blah, blah. You create an avatar of the prospect, right? And then you've got the product, which is over here. So I'll make sure you can see it. So you've got the product, prospect, and product over here. And all your marketing needs to do, whether it's an autoresponder or a pay-per-click ad or a billboard or whatever it is, all you're trying to do with marketing is bridge the gap between where the prospect is right now, which is they don't have your product, to the point where they do have your product and they're getting the result that they want, assuming they use it. So when it comes to autoresponders and working for clients, if I was to say sit down with a client, it could be anyone from like a plumber to a startup to whatever. What I would start by doing is I would first try and get a really clear understanding of who that prospect is, of the sort of person who buys their product or signs up to their service. Who are they? How old are they? How much money do they have? How educated are they? What do they care about? What keeps them up at night? What's all these kind of questions, right? And then I'd also get a really intimate understanding of their product. What are the benefits? What are the features? What are the downsides of the product? What might piss people off when they buy the product? And really try and get a lot of people don't really know how to sell their product, so they're not going to be able to tell me. I'm going to have to go get their product and really dig deep into what problems it's going to solve for the prospect. And then when I'm thinking about the emails, I'm just matching that up. I'm just looking for what do I have to say to someone that's going to get them to take action on getting this solution, assuming it's a good product. And what that means for an autoresponder is that the setup is very simple. Email one welcomes them, and I've been playing around with a couple of different ideas, which I'll tell you in a minute. And in email one, I ask them a question. I do a few things. I ask them a question. I tell them what they're going to receive in this email series to kind of set the stage for everything. I do tell them they're going to receive daily emails, or maybe it's every 3 days, depending on. Basically, the more often the better. I do daily. I suggest other people do daily. If not comfortable with that, go to every 3 days. And then so email two. So let's go back to email one. The question that I asked them will be something like, is to get market data, market feedback, which might be something like, what ideal transformation, what ideal outcome would you like me to help you bring into your life with email marketing, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then I might say something like, well, what are you afraid of in regards to that outcome? What scares you about it? And it's incredible. I've told this to people before, and they're like, well, no one's going to reply to that. And it's actually quite amazing. Sometimes you get short replies, which is 1 or 2 sentences, and sometimes you get huge paragraphs, 200 or 300 words from someone who's just really in pain. If it's a health problem or if it's a marketing problem, they'll just give you these big stories. That's great. So that's email. That's email one, and then I'll tell them, what they're going to receive. Catchy bullet points. In my case, it'd be like why open rates don't matter. The single most important thing in email marketing and autoresponders, that kind of thing. I'm trying to tease them and get them excited about what's coming up. And email two, the goal is I'm looking for engagement, right? I'm trying to get. There's a lot of things like Google's tab. New email tabbing system with the promotions tab. I want to get them to really engage with my email. So in email one, they've replied to it. That's a huge thing. In email two, there's going to be I want to include an image in there, and the alt tag is going to say click display images, which means that if they open that email and images aren't automatically displaying, there's going to be text there that says click display images, and they're going to want to know they're going to click that because they're like, well, there's an image there, and if you don't have that thing there, nothing will appear there. It'll just be a blank space, and they're not going to know that there's an image there. So I get them to say click display images, and hopefully they click display images always, which improves my sender score again. And then I want to give them a link in that email too to some sort of guide or resource, or maybe even my product, to get them clicking a link. So that means in the first two emails, they've replied to me. They've just displayed images in their email inbox, which is great, and they've clicked a link. So that's all setting the stage that I'm trying to build up momentum or build up get them used to taking action thanks to my emails, and then after that it's basically just pitch in every email. But it's not using the HIPS framework like we talked about before. It's not just an email after email after email about why they should buy my product. I'm giving them value in the form of soft information. This is another thing another road we can go down, and giving them my product is the hard information. So what does that mean? So the soft information is me going, all right, today we're going to talk about empathy. And this 7-letter word it's the most important thing in marketing. It's not, when it comes to copywriting, people think it's bullets, they think it's headlines, they think it's, being a John Carlton or a Gary Howard or one of the best copywriters in the world. They think that's going to make their business successful. But all that's a lot of crap. What they really need to do is understand exactly who they're trying to talk to. And if they can do that, they're gonna clean up. Even if they're not that great at writing copy, if they just understand the marketplace, hot buttons, the problems, and all that, they're gonna be able to write the best copy, way better than any shit-hot copywriter who doesn't actually know this stuff. So it's like, so I'm basically selling them on the idea that empathy is important, and that's valuable in and of itself, especially to a person or a business owner who hasn't heard this before. If no one's ever told them about that the most important thing is marketing is empathy, I've just done them a favor. But then the pitch in that email will be something like, now, you can go and figure this out on your own. You can go and talk to your customers. But what I do in the McIntyre method is I give you 3 specific questions you need to answer before you can get started writing any autoresponder sequence. And I'm going to show you how to create an avatar of this person so that when you finally sit down to write these emails, you don't know exactly who you're talking to. So you can go and figure this out on yourself. Or you can just buy my product, and it will give you the exact step-by-step guide to figuring this stuff out yourself. Here's a link.
So essentially what you're doing is you're teaching the what and you're selling the how.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And one thing that's worth pointing out here is this is good. I sell information. I sell the how. So I should not be teaching the how. Otherwise, there's no point to buying my product. But if you're selling, say, supplements, sort of hard products, you can talk to them all day about how to find the ingredients, apply the correct strategy for the context. So, if I'm selling the how, then I can't teach the how in my emails because they wouldn't buy. But if I'm selling a commodity, not information, I can give them any sort of information just because information's interesting. So it's the basic idea, the way I think about email, is you're basically trying to capture someone's attention for a couple of minutes and then give them some sort of relevant offer. Make them an offer about your product or a link or something like that. And you have to be entertaining. So that's where give them something useful, make them laugh, send them an inspirational story. I've got a bunch of those kind of stories. And then just give them an offer. So it's like, get their attention, make them laugh, smile, engage their emotions, and then give them a pitch. And just do that every day.
So what do you say to people that are scared to sell? Because oftentimes I see people that are, and this happens a lot with like authors, where they're just scared to death to sell. And they're scared to death to like, oh, I'm gonna ruin my email list because I'm mailing them too much and I don't want to sell them. What do you say to the people that bring up those walls?
I mean, I used to think like that, and the thing that changed it for me was something that another email marketer said, and it's basically that if you have a good product, which could be a book, for these authors, and it legitimately solves someone's problem, it's great information. And in the case of authors, I mean, it probably is. Like authors pour their heart and their soul into these books, and they'll spend years and years writing these things. and it's their baby, and they know it's going to help someone. Maybe it's going to make them laugh and cry because it's a great story. Maybe it's going to inspire them to live a better life. Maybe it's going to teach them how to do something. And the author believes in this book, but he's too afraid to sell it. Now, the problem with that is that if it legitimately solves someone's problem, if it is adding value to someone's life, to the target prospect's life, then I believe that the author or whoever it is, has an ethical duty to sell that product as best as he can. Because if he doesn't, he hasn't given the opportunity to his target prospect to enjoy and absorb that value. In a weird kind of theoretical sense, he's stolen from his prospect because he hasn't let he's done the thinking for his prospect, which none of us like, especially Westerners. It's a bit different in Thailand, but as Westerners, we really hate it when other people do our thinking for us. So what someone's doing when they refuse to sell their product is they're thinking for their prospect. And what they really should be doing is saying, well, hey, prospect, this book's really going to change your life. I'm going to let you make your own mind up about it. But it's really going to help you. And blah, blah, blah. So that's how, I think that's really how people need to think about themselves, their products. And that if it's a great product, then they should be selling it. Like they have a duty to sell that.
I totally agree. I just see that happen time after time. So getting into the email, the structure, the writing, the methodical process. One of the things that I do is I look at an email as far as a sequential piece to it. So the purpose of my subject line is for them to open the email, and the purpose of the body copy is for them to click on the link.
Yep.
So I'm thinking of that all the time. What other types of things do you think of when you're crafting this email, in your subject lines and then in your body copy?
I think about it, it's like it's easy to get caught up, I find. I've done it. We all do this, talking about all the little things, like whether it's the opening lines, subject lines, and all that. But all right, so number one with my list, what will happen is the first few emails someone gets from you, they're not going to know who you are, so you're going to have good subject lines. But once they get to know you, they're going to open your email, and if they like you, they're going to open your emails based on the fact they like you, not because you have a good subject line. So subject lines, I believe, are far more important at the start of an email sequence than once you start once you're a few emails into it. That doesn't always apply. And of course, good subject lines are always better than bad subject lines. But you got to think about why someone will be opening those emails. So for me, I have, so you see different email marketers do this. I have my from name for my email. So when you open it up in Gmail, it'll say John McIntyre next to my email, not drop dead copy, not my company name. Mm-hmm. That's very important, especially if you're selling from a person. Ultimately, startups should be doing this too. That they should have someone and some sort of person or figurehead that's sending these emails. So then the person reading it can build a relationship with that person, not the company as a whole. Now, so what? I just lost my train of thought. All right, so with drop dead copy, I've got a couple letters before the start of the subject line. So what happens is, at first, people are opening it based on the subject line. But after a few emails, once they decide they like my emails, they're going to open them just because they're my emails, which means that anything I can do to signal that this is John McIntyre's email and not some other email is going to help them increase that open rate. And so that's why I got John McIntyre in the from name and then this DDC for drop dead copy right before the subject line. So kind of like bracket, DDC, bracket, colon. And as for the emails themselves, I just go back to that HIPS framework. Is that first you got to hook their attention. So it's kind of like when they first sign up, you're hooking their attention with the subject line. Once you get a few emails into it, you're hooking their attention with you, with your personality, your person. And then it's kind of once they open the email, it's why should they keep? You basically got to answer this question straight out. Why the hell should they read that email? And the way I like to think about it is that, say you're at a picnic or a barbecue and your friend comes up to you and he says, "You're never going to believe what happened the other day." And then he just stops and doesn't say anything. You're going to ask him, unless you're like a really cold, cold-hearted dude. You're going to be like, "Well, dude, what happened? Like tell me." Like, what? Especially if he's got that tone of voice where you know that something crazy has happened. You know that there's some sort of story or something that he's going to tell you that's going to shock you or make you laugh or whatever. And you want to have that response when someone reads the first few lines of your email. And that can be with literally a line like that. You can say that in an email. "You're never going to believe what happened the other day." And you say that, and then what you do is you don't tell them right away. You kind of have a bit of playful banter for 100 words, 150 words, and then you tell them at the end of the email right before you give them a pitch, or maybe right after you give them the pitch. So I mean, that's pretty much it. Get their attention and then answer that question of why should they read the email straight away. So then, why should they read your email at all? And then you're giving them a pitch eventually. And then just do that regularly.
It's funny you say these things and you make it sound very easy. And I talk with business owners. I hear their comments. I read what they're saying, and it really is coming down to the fundamentals of what you are talking about. I think if more people would realize that email was like dating someone, and you have to flirt, you have to date, and there's a process to it.
Yep.
That their businesses would just continue to take off. And it sounds like, well, I'm not going to say it sounds like, I understand that you get that very well. Now, what's something that we could help out our listeners to kind of do a full wrap up? What's something that you could share with them that would help them to take a healthy email list, something that's working already, but make it that much better? So we're not talking about beginner stuff. We're not talking about creating the campaigns, but what kind of little tweaks can you help someone so that they grow it, so that it has exponential growth?
You mean grow the list from a list building perspective, or make it get more out of their list?
Get more out of the list, because growing the list, the actual subscribers, that's 10 different interviews,
right.
But the actual engagement piece is what we're talking about here.
Right. Well, I'd say to begin with, the biggest mistake that most people are making is they're just not doing it. Or if they are doing it, they think, 5 email. Like, I mean, one of my someone emailed me the other day, and it was someone I did a podcast interview with actually, and they wanted to know what a good length for an autoresponder sequence was, and they made a comment which I thought was ridiculous. They're like 10 emails. That's a long autoresponder sequence, right?
What?
I can't remember who it was or what the context was, but they thought that 10 emails was a really long autoresponder sequence. And most business owners aren't even doing this. Like, don't have an autoresponder at all if they even have a list. And if they are, they think their 7-day or 7 email crash course, video course on how to do X that's the autoresponder. But the big win here is doing this regularly and doing this for a long, long, long time. Because depending on the market, someone's going to buy in the first week, the first month. But if you do this for an entire year, if you had a year-long autoresponder sequence, and I'll readily admit I don't have this set up yet in my business, but I would love to have it because I recognize the value in it, that you're going to pick up. The longer that is, the more people you're going to pick up with that autoresponder sequence. There should be no end to it. So maybe the business, the entrepreneur needs to have some sort of regular email strategy where twice a week he's sending out some sort of email. Maybe it's an autoresponder, or maybe it's a broadcast where he's got maybe there's a digest every Monday morning about it's kind of breaking down the events of that week or the events of the last week. It's going to help his people out. That solves the problem, so they don't have to go and read the news themselves. And then on Thursday or Friday, he could have something that he sends out. But the point is to be engaged regularly. There's no end to it. There's no ultimate length, but engage regularly with the list and never stop. And that when they're ready to buy, when their problem that they have that you solve is finally painful enough that they're willing to take action, you'll be the first person they think of. That, to me, is it's so simple. It's so easy to explain, but that's the big problem in my mind, that most business people who have a list and who do maybe mail it a little bit, this is the biggest problem. They don't need better copy or better anything. They just need to email their list more.
Consistency.
Yep.
That's a really good piece. Right now, I want to invite all of our listeners on the podcast to subscribe to your podcast, which is the Email Marketing Podcast.
Correct.
So go on your phone and type in the Email Marketing Podcast. And I also suggest for our listeners to subscribe to your email newsletter. Go to Drop Dead Copy. Because, and this isn't something that I do in all the other podcasts. So our listeners right now are hearing this, and it's kind of a little bit of a curveball. But I want them to subscribe to get a perfect example of how it should go. Or I'm going to say perfect, a good example of how it should go. Because there's no such thing as perfect. Because,
right.
If you're running something out of the Y Combinator, you're going to have a different voice than if you're selling an info product. or if you're a travel agency versus a documentary filmmaker or whatever it may be. Every single person's gonna have a different voice, but you've built in the consistent tone, you've built in the persuasion structures and the storytelling. And so I'm encouraging our listeners to subscribe to that right now. So I haven't done that before, but I really want them to get those really solid examples. And it's kind of odd that I'm doing that because I actually have email marketing courses that I've created that I sell.
Yeah.
But I want them to really hear from a master. So before we wrap up, John, I want to do two things.
Yep.
One is a challenge that you can give our listeners that they can take and do within the next 48 hours.
The next 48 hours. Most of them have a list, right? Already.
I would say most people do, but there's going to be some people that don't. There's the perpetual, I have to get everything perfect before I start people.
Okay. So the people with the list, I'll give you two challenges. The people with the list should sit down right after this podcast episode and write an email out to their list about how they're going to be mailing them more often starting today. And they're going to commit to it, and then they're going to send that email out to their list. They're going to make a plan today based on the information they've learned in this podcast, they're going to commit to some sort of publishing schedule, whether it's an autoresponder that they build out to 3 months or 6 months or a year, or maybe they're going to have some broadcast schedule where they send in a couple emails a week to their list. And then they're going to write that email today or tomorrow in the next 48 hours and send that to their list, committing themselves to it. And then the people who don't have the list, they're going to set up a squeeze page and create some sort of offer that it could suck. Maybe it's bad copy, bad whatever. Maybe it's got typos and all that sort of stuff. But they're going to make some sort of offer on a squeeze page, and they're going to get traffic to it somehow, whether it's with maybe they have a Facebook page or a website. Somehow they can figure it out. At the very least, put a squeeze page up, put a form on there, and try and get at least one sign up, because that'll get the ball rolling. And once the momentum to me is, with business and with life, that's the most important thing. It's not about being perfect or making it all shiny and sweet and everything. It's just getting things rolling. And then once that happens, once you get that momentum, it's kind of hard to fail because you just keep taking action.
Absolutely. I really like that 48-hour challenge there. The email for the consistency, that kind of puts you, that forces things to happen.
Yeah, because if you don't do it, everyone's going to be like, this guy said he was going to email me, but now he's not emailing me. What's going on? You lose credibility. So it's kind of like make yourself accountable to your own list.
And making yourself consistent is only going to help your business. So, what's the biggest regret you have from doing email marketing? Maybe it's something that you wish you would have done sooner, or is it a mistake that you wish you would have avoided?
I think it was taking too long to get around to actually selling. When I first started, I thought I had to do the content marketing approach. Content marketing, don't get me wrong. I have a podcast, you got a podcast. Content marketing works when you do it, when it's in the right context and when you understand, the prospect products and you have the model mapped out. But most people think of content marketing as a way to curry favor with their fans, and it's kind of like a very needy strategy, kind of like a guy in a bar or at a party who's trying to pick up a chick and he's trying to be funny and entertaining. He's just trying to be everything so he can win this chick over. When that's the wrong mindset. You can't be needy like that. And it took me a while to get that. I had that mindset that a lot of people have these days, which is just give them all this free stuff and maybe they'll like you, maybe. And what I've learned and what took a long time, I wish I learned sooner, was that your best prospects, they love to be sold to. They have the problem that your product or your service solves. So you are winning brownie points with the best people when you go and sell to them. And sure, you're going to piss people off, and there'll be some people who don't like it, but they're the people who don't matter. And so it's realizing that it's okay to make people mad if you're focusing just on knuckling down and helping that main prospect.
Selling sooner, helping them out.
Yep.
Getting some cojones.
Yeah, straight up, it's like that. Don't be a bitch, start selling stuff,
Well, it's a business or it's not.
Right.
So, no, that's good. How can our listeners, besides going to dropdeadcopy.com and subscribing to the podcast, which I suggest everyone do, subscribe to the email marketing podcast on iTunes. Besides doing those two things, how can they say thanks to you?
They can send me an email. They can go to john@dropdeadcopy.com, or they can find me on Twitter. Twitter's the only really social network that I'm using right now. That's John McIntyre _.
Okay, can you
Twitter.
spell out your name? Because you got a weird spelling last name.
I know, man. I need a solution to this. It's John, which is pretty easy. McIntyre is McIntyre.
Okay.
So Twitter, it's John McIntyre _ is the username there.
Perfect. Hey, it was a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. I had a blast.
Thanks for coming all the way from Thailand to do this.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
You're welcome.